You ever find yourself in a really complex, confusing conversation? It's like a thick fog just rolls in and all of a sudden, you're totally lost. Well, today, we're going to build a lexicon. Think of it as a toolkit to help us chart a course right through that tricky landscape of ideas.
Oh, you know the feeling. You're trying to get a really important point across, or you're trying to listen to someone, but the whole concept is just slippery, right? It's like the perfect word is just on the tip of your tongue, but you can't quite grab it. That's exactly the kind of frustration we're tackling today.
So consider this our map. We're calling the theme fog and friction, and it's a vocabulary that's going to act like our toolkit. It's part compass, part flashlight, designed to help us name, describe, and hopefully cut right through all that ambiguity and those really frustrating mixed signals.
All right, first things first. If we're going to navigate the fog, we need to understand its different shapes and forms. This whole first part is about mapping that fog, giving a name to each specific kind of confusion, so we can actually start to see our way through it. Let's start with a big one, an enigma. Now, an enigma isn't just a simple puzzle. It's a deep, kind of profound mystery. Think about a person whose motives you just can't figure out, or a weird historical event that has no clear explanation. It's not a problem with a simple answer waiting to be found. It's much deeper than that.
See, in this example, her departure isn't a logistical issue to solve. The real mystery is why. It's about her motive, the meaning behind it. It's something you ponder, not something you just figure out. And that's what makes it a real enigma.
Now, let's contrast that with a conundrum. A conundrum is also a difficult problem for sure, but it feels more like a riddle that's actually meant to be solved. It implies that there is an answer, even if it's a really tricky one. So while an enigma is a mystery, a conundrum is more of a challenge.
And here you can see it in action. This is a classic business problem, right? It's thorny, it's got conflicting demands, but it's a problem that a team is meant to work on and solve. And that's the key difference. You solve a conundrum, but you contemplate an enigma.
You know, not all fog is the same. It kind of has different textures. Sometimes information is equivocal, meaning it's intentionally vague, like a politician's non-answer. Other times it's convoluted, just a tangled mess of complexity, like a super dense legal document. And sometimes a meaning can even be diaphanous, so subtle and light that it's almost impossible to get a firm grip on.
And then there are times when the fog feels, well, intentional. That's where the word esoteric comes into play. Think of this as the fog of an insider's club. It's knowledge that's deliberately obscure to most of us because you need a very specific, specialized background to get it. Like academic jargon or the super technical language engineers use. It's not meant for everybody, and really, that's the whole point.
But hey, confusion doesn't just pop up out of thin air. A lot of the time, it starts with an idea that just isn't fully baked yet. So in this next section, we're going to look at the words that describe an idea's earliest, fuzziest stages, from that first little spark to a full-on shadow.
Ideas often have a kind of life cycle. First, an idea might be latent. It's there, but it's dormant, like a seed buried underground. Then it becomes incipient. It's just starting to sprout. The very first signs are showing. And finally, it's often inchoate. This is the idea in its raw, messy, first draft stage. It's real, it exists, but it's totally rudimentary and needs a ton of work before it becomes clear.
Okay, so we've mapped the fog, we've looked at where it comes from, but what about us? I mean, how do we as humans react when we're lost in that fog? This next part is all about the human side of confusion.
Here's a reaction I think we can all relate to. We dither. When the path forward is unclear, when the options are ambiguous, we just hesitate. We go back and forth, completely stuck in this state of agitated indecision. To dither is to be basically paralyzed by the fog. And then there's that feeling of being completely thrown for a loop. That is to be confounded. It's way more than just being confused. It's being totally baffled because something happened that just completely defied what you expected. It's that moment of sharp, surprising disorientation. Now, here's a subtle but really important difference. Being gullible, that's usually seen as a negative trait, right? It kind of implies you're easily fooled. But credulity is a much more neutral term. It's just the tendency to believe things are true. You can show credulity by trusting a friend, which is great, or by falling for a scam, which is not so great. One feels like a character flaw, while the other is just a state of being.
Sometimes we actually create our own fog. An insular mindset does exactly that. It's when a person, or maybe even a whole group, is so closed off that they become ignorant of the world outside. This creates a bubble, right? A self-imposed fog, where new ideas can't get in and a clear perspective can't get out.
So, we've journeyed deep into the fog.
In this final section, let's talk about what happens because of all this confusion. And, more importantly, let's look at the vocabulary that can finally lead us out into the clear.
A huge consequence of wading through foggy, conflicting ideas is dissonance. It's that jarring, uncomfortable feeling you get when two of your beliefs are at war with each other or when what you're doing doesn't line up with your values. It's like the internal static that gets generated by all that unresolved confusion.
Confusion can also lead to disparate outcomes. This word describes things that are so fundamentally different, you really can't even compare them. Imagine a team project where nobody has a clear direction. You might end up with a bunch of disparate parts that just don't fit together to make any sense.
And when the fog gets way too thick, sometimes progress just stops. That's a hiatus. It's a pause, a gap in a process. It's what happens when the confusion gets so overwhelming that the only real option is to just put everything on hold until you can find some clarity.
So, what's the way out of all this? Well, this vocabulary we've been building, that's our toolkit. We can use these words to push for precision. By being able to identify when someone is just rambling or using tired, hackneyed phrases that don't mean anything anymore, we can demand clarity. The very words we've learned today are the antidotes, because naming the fog is always the first step to clearing it.
So we've built our map. We've got the tools to navigate the tricky terrain of ambiguity. The only question left is this. Now that you have this map, where in your world, in your conversations, in your work, in your own thinking, are you going to use it to find a little more clarity? Thanks so much for joining me.